Good space time, y'all, and welcome to a new episode of the Citizen Cosmos podcast, a source for educational insights into the world of Web3. Today, we are joined by Marko Baricevic, product owner at Cosmos SDK and co-founder at Binary Builders. We do some history by looking back at the birth of IBC. We discuss modular architecture, sovereign rollups, ZK technology, and the future. We explore how to solve governance in a decentralized way, semantics, being a tech maxi instead of a token maxi, and the importance of learning from each other across ecosystems. Finally, we try to look into what drives different people, how to achieve happiness, and perseverance is the key to achieving your goals.
Modular software allows you to experiment more with different technologies. Like, what is a sovereign rollup? A sovereign rollup is technically a blockchain that just posts some data to that availability layer. I'm having fun, and this is like one of the greatest riches in life, which is just like enjoy what you're doing and not have it seem like a job. Validators really embody this idea that they are like part of the ecosystem. Tomorrow, like the limitation, a sovereign community won't be launching a chain, it's going to be launching a rollup and stuff like this, and then launching a contract.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Citizen Cosmos podcast. Today, I have with me Marko from Binary Builders. and I'm going to highlight that. Marko will tell us in a minute why I'm highlighting that. Marko, hi, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to be having you, man. I mean, we met a long time ago in Berlin. Finally got to be interviewing you as a guest on the show. I've been looking forward to that for a while. Before I start, though, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit in any way? Who is Marko? What does Marko do? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I've been in Cosmos for like coming up on 4 years now. So I joined shortly after the Cosmos Hub launched. Started in the Cosmos SDK as like a developer relations engineer. Then when Tendermint was only one engineer, I went down and worked on Tendermint, and then the team slowly got built out. And after the team started getting built out, then I moved back to developer relations, and then ended up coming to the Cosmos SDK again. And so now leading the Cosmos SDK to a new vision, kind of like we achieved this original vision that Jake 1 put out, and now we're kind of working on what's next in Cosmos.
You know what? Let me throw a question straight away there. I mean, it's usually not the place I start with. We usually start with nicer chit chat. But you said the vision of Jay. What's that vision of Jay that you're talking about? Like, can you describe it? Because not everybody has been in Cosmos for so long, and definitely not all our listeners are from Cosmos, and definitely not all of them know that. So it would be nice to hear what exactly you're referring to, if you can, of course.
Yeah, definitely. So Jay was originally like who the person who pioneered like proof of stake, and so this original vision of like proof of stake, and it's like what that evolves from like these proof of work chains like Bitcoin, Ethereum at the time, Dogecoin, many chains. There is like an easier world, and the easier world was kind of like proof of stake. But then it's like you have this problem of these like chains are isolated, and how do they communicate to each other? So first of all, we start with like these sovereign communities, which are chains in themselves. And then the next step here, this was like the Cosmos SDK and Tendermint at the time. The next step here would be to add a communication layer between these chains to be able to achieve economic exchange or information exchange. And this is where IBC came in. And this original vision was really strong in the beginning. And it's like, if we look back and look at where blockchain is today, we can see that like a lot of that original vision is kind of like what is today's blockchain world. And that was back in like 2014, 2015, 2016. And so just really amazing to see like there was like such a strong vision, such a strong passion from the early people that like really fueled the future of Cosmos and in general, almost the future of like blockchain in general.
And I guess you could refer to the whole vision of Jay or to Cosmos specifically as modular, right?
Yeah.
In terms of and I know you're a fan of modular architectures, right? Why? What's the big deal here?
I think like the word like modular has been like it's a bit abused right now. So you have this like modular like stack where it's like you have things like Celestia where they're separating like execution and data availability and like consensus and stuff like this. And so it's more of like I like to call it of a compartmentalization. So it's like you're putting things in certain boxes that do certain things instead of everything doing one. But then it's like the modular software is kind of like modular software allows you to experiment more with different technologies, with different technologies coming out in the world. And it becomes like a library for how to build a state machine instead of like, oh, this is how you build a blockchain. And so this is, yeah, so it's kind of like on the two different spectrums of like modularity. But I think that they're both super fun and they're both super interesting. And I think it's like we're really starting to scratch the surface of both of them in Cosmos. So it's like when the Cosmos SDK, if we look how the software was written, if we look how Tendermint was originally written, and if you actually like dive in and get into the mental space of the early authors, you kind of see that these pieces of software were written in a modular fashion, but like due to potentially like a lack of time, a lot of time was lost and whatnot because you're developing this technology that is like supposed to stand the test of time. A lot of this modularity was lost in order to launch, to like move closer to launch. And so now we're kind of like trying to bring that modularity, that original vision of the software into reality.
Before we go to a bit more back to you, sorry, I couldn't help not to ask those things because it was actually on my questions. I really swear, like it was on the question list. It just popped in the right place. So I'm gonna ask like one last question before we get back to you. I want to know your personal opinion, considering like so far, and thank you for it, by the way. You've been explaining like in a very like understandable, I think, manner to anyone who can hear it. That you don't have to have heard that before, probably, to understand it. But what's your personal opinion today, considering all your experience, not just with Cosmos, but in generally with programming and understanding architectures and how everything works, with the opposite of modular stacks, with Bitcoin and that approach to cryptocurrency or to blockchain, not to cryptocurrency, sorry, but maybe to blockchain in general. Is it still feasible? Is it going to get those networks that are still sticking to those kind of architectures anywhere in the future?
It's kind of interesting because early on in Cosmos we have this term called zone, like you're a like Cosmos zone. And it's like when you look at the definition of what a zone is, it wasn't even like you're using Tendermint and Cosmos or the Cosmos SDK. It's like you're using IBC, and it's like we kind of had this like thing of like, oh, you're using IBC, you're a zone. It's like, and then it's kind of like you're pulling everyone into your like verbiage, and it doesn't. And sometimes people like want to participate in the economic exchange, but don't want to be like considered labeled a zone. I think we're kind of going through a similar thing right now in the rollup world, because it's like if you look at like you have like decentralized sequencers, you have decentralized sequencers, and then you have like sovereign rollups. Like, what is a sovereign rollup? A sovereign rollup is technically a blockchain that just posts some data to that availability layer. And then it's like, okay, now everything is a rollup by definition. If you just like try to get a bit more security, it's like you're a rollup all of a sudden. We're kind of going into that like realm of like, oh, like it's like one verb for like one adjective to like fit everything, which is kind of like different. I don't know. It's kind of like we're yeah. I don't know. I find it weird because it's like we did this early in Cosmos and we went away from it. But I do think there's a really big need for chains themselves. So like I think it's like you have like Ethereum, Bitcoin, like Solana, Near, like these chains that are like Near is a bit more modular, I'd say, but like Solana, these like monoliths, it's like there's still a huge valid case because it's like not everyone wants to manage their own infra. Like managing your own infrastructure is like I was just on a call with Bez from the SDK team, and it's like if we put like deploying a smart contract as level 1, and then you put like a blockchain as level 10 in difficulty, then it's like rollups are kind of like there's so many different tiers of rollups that rollups have the potential to fill up 2, 4, 6, 8. But it's like for the majority of applications, like you only need level 1. Like level 1, it's you don't have to worry about anything. Like level 2, all of a sudden is like a centralized sequencer, let's say. Then it's like you have to start managing your own infrastructure. You have to manage uptime and all this stuff by deploying a contract. You're just like not worrying about it.
I do agree. I do think that in a few years' time, I'm not sure the word rollup will be, something that we're going to use for sure. Definitely.
I think it's like super interesting because it's like people can like deploy faster and like it's kind of like this bridging between like contract and chain. But it's like, I mean, it's like it's a scalability thing, and it's like a scalability thing if fees are high. But like okay, on Ethereum, like fees are kind of high. Like they're not as high as before, but like this idea of like everyone needs to have their own roll up type thing is kind of like the same thing of like the app chain. Everyone needs to have their like own app chain, and I think it's like it makes sense for certain things, and it doesn't make sense for others. Like I think we can see a lot of chains in Cosmos that are like launching because like during the bull market there is like a premium on launching L1s when it's like they could have just been a smart contract.
It's interesting to see. You know what? But let's save. I'm gonna ask you to save this thought because I want to get back with you for that because I definitely have wanted to talk to you about this. But before we get into that, I still want to pick a little bit about your history, if you don't mind, like to get to know Marco a little bit. I remember we met in Berlin when
Like interchain conversations in like 2019, I think, right?
yes, and we didn't start. We started just Citizen Cosmos. Then it was the first time we recorded an episode was in the office, but not about Citizen Cosmos. How when I met you, how did you? I mean, you kind of said the high overview of your story with the SDK, but let's go into more details if you want, of course. But how did you get to work
Mhm.
there? How did you get? I mean, you're obviously not German. Let me say that. So yeah.
So I'm one of the few people in Berlin. So I'm located in Berlin, Germany. I'm one of the few people that's in crypto in Berlin, Germany, from a different country that didn't move to Berlin for crypto. So I was studying in the States. Woke up one morning and was like, I want to go to Croatia. My family's from Croatia, and so I just wanted to go hang out with my grandparents. Hung out there for 8 months. My dad came and he was like, why don't you go study in Germany? And so I went and studied in Germany for a year. I met my now wife, and then she was in Berlin, and like I moved to Berlin. And like back then, I wasn't like programming; I was actually studying business. And I was like, what is a skill that I can learn to get a job in Germany without having to learn German? And I found like computer programming, and so I started teaching myself how to computer program, how to do programming, and ended up at a like blockchain enterprise company. So it was an enterprise consultancy, and it was really fun because we were building POCs for like every 3 months of like different use cases of blockchain, which was like really, really cool and a lot of fun. I got to play with a lot of like, it was mainly we were using Quorum from JP Morgan. And so I got to play with a lot of like Solidity and all this stuff. And so someone was like sharing on our Slack, and it was this video of Jaquan and Ethan Buckman at a meetup in SF. And I watched it, and they were like demoing Tendermint at the time. And I remember like for some reason I was like, I want to work with these guys. And it just like, and like since that I like started following the Cosmos repo and like started contributing on the open source layer, started following, figuring out how to run nodes and everything. And then around like January of 2019 or like December of 2018, I applied to work at AIB. And it took me 4 months to get hired. And I went through like three different hiring managers, because it's like the first one was for, I don't know if you remember Fabian
Yes.
Weber
Yes.
from Looney
Yes.
or Voyager. I forgot what the name was at the end. Was for his team, and then they were spinning out. And then I went to a Cosmos meetup, and there was a panel, and I was like from the crowd, like participating in the questions because I was like studying Cosmos. So I was like enamored by it. And then afterwards, they're like, "Hey, are you looking for a job?" And I was like, "I applied like 2 months ago and haven't heard back." And then Billy Rennekamp was like, "Give me your email and I'll pass it to the recruiter, to our HR manager." That week, the HR manager got fired. So I never heard back. And then Jack Zamplin, for like no reason, just like follows me on Twitter, and I DM him, and I'm like, "Hey, like if it's a no, tell me it's a no and I'll give up, because I really want to work for Cosmos." And I was just like hell bent on just working for Cosmos. And then after like two more sets of interviews, I got hired. So it was just kind of like, I don't know, there's like something in the original video that I was just like, I want to work with Jay and Ethan.
Actually, you mentioned JP Morgan, right? And I had Will Martino on from Cadena, and I believe he was one of the guys who was originally developing the JP Morgan coin. It's interesting that a lot of people consider them a Cosmos ecosystem project, which they not really are, but like it's, I don't know.
Yeah,
There's a lot of Cosmos ecosystem projects which sometimes considered Cosmos ecosystem. Everything
everything's
is
a
a zone.
zone.
Everything is a roll up. Everything is on the roll up. Man, but you are also, or used to be, and I'm not sure if you still officially, if the title, what is the name of it, still exists. The head of product of SDK, right? Or is how does it? What does that mean?
I just say like SDK lead, because it's like I do product and project management, and so do a mix of both.
So I want to talk to you about that as well. But before that, what's so basically you kind of answered it. So basically, a head of product is basically an SDK lead, right? Is that what you're? That's
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Because it was interesting. What does the title like SDK product owner? It's interesting. But you mentioned straight away that you do product and project management. And this is actually was a question from me to you. How does your typical day look as an SDK product lead? And is it more project management or product management?
Right now, I'm doing a lot more coding than usual, just because I'm trying to complete some tasks so we can like clean up some technical debt, while the rest of the team is like working on different work scopes. Um, but usually, it's like kind of like wake up, go through all the notifications, check the PRs. If anything stands out, like jump in and review it, and make sure everything is like going smoothly. And go to the project boards, make sure everything's like ready for the engineers to like come in and like pick up tasks, make sure all the issues are like kind of well explained, so people can kind of like jump in without having to like go ask for the context. After that, it's like that's kind of like the project side, organizing the sprint, like creating the OKRs and milestones for the ICF, managing that relationship. On the product side, it's like a lot of like, I don't know, it's kind of like dev rally. It's like going and talking to the teams and being like, hey, what's your issue? But it's like we aren't, so we do that quite a bit. I would say we probably do a bit less than like IBC Go. The IBC Go team is like really good at like going out and getting like product feedback. I would say like the reason we do less is because it's like fairly clear for us what we need to clean up in the SDK and what we need to fix to create a better experience. And so it's like when we go talk to users, sometimes they're like, hey, like we want this feature, like because we're trying to do this and this. And we're like, we understand you want this, but like there's this other thing that like fixes that and then fixes these other like 5 issues that's going to make your life a lot easier. We think like we should work on this instead of this. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And so it's like a lot of like managing that, because it's like like I've been in Cosmos for so long, and I kind of like, and I run validators, and I like talk to the teams who like are building the software, and I'm in their discords, and I understand, and I go read their code. I go read the forks, the forks of the SDK code. I participate in the broader blockchain ecosystem. I like go read Optimism, go read Arbitrum, go read Substrate, go read Solana, go read Near, like participate in all these like hackathons. And so like I kind of have an idea of like where things are, like I try to have a better idea of like where things are going in the future. And it's like, instead of like playing catch up, it's like, how do we make the SDK like meet that point in the future instead of like us always like following behind? And so it's like a bit of like balancing those two acts.
That's very cool, actually, because I wasn't expecting you to give that answer. I wasn't expecting you to give any particular answer, but I wasn't expecting this too. So it's cool to hear that the people that work on important protocols, whether it's, the Cosmos SDK, or in my opinion, there are several others there, which can be, put into not maybe the same category or a near category, whatever. But to hear that you stay in focus with the other tech rather than hearing an answer like, oh, no, we don't give a shit about all the other tech out there,
Yeah.
we're just doing our own shit. And
I mean, for me, it's like, I'm not like, I love Cosmos because of the original vision, but I'm like not biased on the tech. Like when people are like, oh, I'm on Cosmos SDK maxi, like I'm a substrate maxi. It's like, for me, it's like I'm just like a tech maxi. Like I love like reading different designs and architectures and like learning from that and being like, oh, like this is how you do it. Like this is how we can make it better and stuff like that.
I always also say that I'm a decentralization maxi. I mean, it's been my, like, I think Twitter nick for like 6 or 7 years or something. Decentralized decentralization. I think it says for 7 years. But man, you mentioned a couple of like sentences ago, validating now, and I actually introduced you as somebody from a validator group, right, or a project. Um, could you talk a little bit about what is a validator for you? But let's try to feel free to give any answer you want, but I would love to hear your opinion, not just on a technical side, but rather as like you were just talking about being ahead of product and how you go out and look at other things. And obviously you have understanding of what other, like what changes happen, because a validator today and a validator 5 years ago or 4 years ago, witness node, let's say, right, they're not the same entity, they have different, so it's also developing. So what is a validator for you today, and where is it going? Who will validators become? What kind of entities? What will they be responsible for or do, in your opinion, of course?
I think that's a good question. And I think it's like the biggest shakeup happening right now in the validating industry is like ZK technology and like proving technology. And I think that's like a new world, like where validators were in the past. Like I remember when the Cosmos Hub launched, like the biggest worry was, will there be enough validators? Will there be enough people who know how to do this? And that's why, like early on, like AIB had this like company policy that you can run validators and they'll delegate because it's like these people know the tech. Now it's like changed a lot. Now it's like there's much more broad ecosystem, and I think I would have to say Cosmos has like the strongest validator community out there. Like not in terms of like running infrastructure, like we are very strong there, but in terms of engagement, like validators really embody this idea that they are like part of the ecosystem. They have a say in the direction of a chain. It's not really like, if we look at other ecosystems, like it's usually like, oh, the foundation or the team behind it says like, we want to do this, like we're just going to push it, we're going to vote on it, we're going to get it expedited, blah blah blah, we're going to upgrade the chain. And the validators are usually kind of like just running the software handles itself. In Cosmos, it's like, while it is like cumbersome to do the upgrades, it is like a path of engagement. It's not like you can really just let your node run for weeks, for months, and like forget about it. It's like you have to like check in here and there. You have to make sure it's alive. You have to, like, for the upgrade, it's like you have to engage. What is the upgrade? What are the changes and stuff like this? So I think it's like a lot more engaging. And then like governance, I think like it was funny. I was in New York a couple of weeks ago, and everyone was talking about like ETH governance and like how it's broken and everything. I'm probably going to get something. Someone's going to say something about that. But then someone in the group was like, Cosmos did it right. And I was like, wait, what? Like, we think we're doing it wrong. We think we can like fix stuff because it's like we've had all these learnings. But a lot of the, like at one point in that like circle, like I started laughing and like under my breath, but because it's like they were like talking about like what they want to change about governance. And I was like, guys, like, we already did this. Like we can already tell you it's not going to work. Like it's like, you want to do this or this. And it was just funny. It was just kind of like learning from each other and everything. But it was like amazing to hear that like someone in the ETH ecosystem is like, oh, like Cosmos did it better than others.
It's interesting because a lot of the validators now, including, for example, ourselves, are striving to be a validator in both ecosystems. And I think that experience will be spread out. I mean, today, the validators, like yourselves guys, or, like if you go Stakefish, P2P, like kind of like the big household names. So we already even say that, right, to describe them, big household names, right? So
I mean, it's also like the economic design is entirely different. Like the economic design of proof of stake in Cosmos is like, I don't know if it was on purpose back then, but like it's built for engagement. Like, because if you look at like how like Polkadot does staking, how Ethereum does staking, it's like you can stake. How you make the most money is like running more nodes instead of getting more stake. And so it's like, because they're like, oh, we need as many nodes as possible for decentralization. But what ends up happening is like the big guys just end up running most of the nodes. But in Cosmos, it's just like a guy in his garage, or the guy using like GCP or DigitalOcean because he doesn't know any better, can like get in the set and actually break even on their setup, because it's like they don't have to run 10 different nodes and get those 10 nodes in the set. They only have to run one. And so, but it's like, because of that, it's like they can market more. Like they market their voting, they market like what they're doing in the ecosystem, and that gets them more delegations. And so it's like built this like engaging ecosystem.
it's interesting that you touched on that topic because what's your opinion, for example, on, let's go a little bit like not extreme, but let's go on popular opinions. Um, there is an unpopular opinion: validators should not vote. What do you think about that? Should validators vote or not vote, considering decentralization?
I think I know it's like it really depends on the chain, because it's like if you look at something like Osmosis, like Osmosis has too many governance proposals for validators. That's like too much engagement. But it's like for other chains, it's like whatever. Let's say for like the Cosmos Hub, when there's like one in a while, it's fine. But I think it's like more so than like validators, it's like there's certain stuff validators should vote on, but there's certain stuff validators should not vote on. And I think that gets more interesting.
Let me rephrase the question. Mark, I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to phrase the question because I didn't phrase it correctly. Not about right now. What about saying there is opinion that says that validators should not be involved in governance at all, and it should be left to the delegators only, and validators should not at all be involved because they're centralized entities with self-interest that want to get delegations. So it's not a question about whether do you think validators should, it's a must for validators to vote on or not, but whether do you believe that it's at all fair enough to say that, oh, validators are centralized entities they shouldn't be involved in governance. Hence, it should be just the chain that votes and then everybody by themselves, but not the validator account itself.
I think that's totally valid. And for like a lot of the proposals out there, I think that's like totally valid. The only problem I see is like a lot of delegating, and like a lot of these chains is like someone delegates and like forgets about it, comes back in a year and then like does it. And it's like if those tokens aren't being, I mean, then it's like you could incentivize voting and like you could do like something like that, which like breeds more engagement. So, I mean, there are ways around it. I think there is a case for validators not to vote, but then there needs to be like a different incentivization mechanism to get people to vote.
There is, and by the way, now considering you mentioned that you are out there and seeing those things, as far as I haven't read the whole thing throughout, but I think Gnosis had a very interesting paper on validation and on like the whole incentivization, sorry, and like how the actors are right. It was crazy, but I didn't like go through that completely. I did like skim through it. I don't know if you saw that. Do you know what I'm talking about or no?
No, I actually haven't read it. I'd actually love to read it.
It's interesting. They were trying to like solve governance, by trying to get rid of centralization, like points in blockchain governance. And by the way, this is question I was asking. I would love to ask you. I was asking this, and during the Lisboa Blockchain Week, I was interviewing a lot of like Stakefish, again P2P, Chorus One, and I was asking them the same set of questions. And one of the questions, and I want to know your opinion as well, if you had a choice, official DAO, like a multisig, sorry, an official multisig, efficient multisig, or a big decentralized DAO, what would be your choice between these two? Without context.
The biggest problem, it's like, it's definitely hard because it's like, I'd say it matters what they're voting on because it's like the biggest problem like Cosmos kind of has. I mean, the biggest problem like any governance system has, like we can use Arbitrum, for example. Like it's like if you put a big number, so let's say the Cosmos Hub team was not getting any funding from the ICF and had to go entirely to the chain to get funding. Like I'm pretty sure it would be a hard time, like no matter the number that they propose. I'm pretty sure it'd be a hard time because it's like once you put a number on chain, there's a bunch of people who are going to say that's too expensive. But they don't, like those people are kind of like saying it because they're seeing the number, they're not seeing the like manpower the money's going to. And so in this scenario, like for like funding stuff, it's going to be more efficient to have like a multi-sig with the DAO being able to like override the multi-sig or something like that. But like, yeah, leaving like funding proposals to the masses is always a bit difficult. And this is why I think like some proposals on the hub like were passed not because like the delegators showed up, it's because the validators saw a future, a long-term direction that this funding would help with. While many delegators may only see like, oh, this is a lot of money going to this one entity, like, and they only think like in the shorter term.
Should everything strive towards decentralization, or is that too much to ask for?
I mean, like in what sense?
I mean, in any sense you want to translate the question. That was the whole point. It was like a slight question from going from one point to another to understand whether you think decentralization is a spectrum in the whole.
Oh, it's
No.
yeah, it's definitely a spectrum, and I think it like decentralization more so matters like on what application you're building. Like if you're building like a DeFi thing, yeah, you want decentralization because you don't want to get sued. But if you're, I don't know, let's say building like a marketplace or something like that, and you don't have a token, let's say, like, do you really need decentralization? Like people are just like, let's say buying and selling NFTs, like OpenSea isn't decentralized. So it's like, it doesn't need decentralization, but it's on a decentralized ledger.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting. It actually brings me to back to a question I didn't ask you about validation, about decentralized, let's say, speak part of validation. Now, I don't know what part you take in binary builders, but you could, of course, welcome, not could, but welcome to talk about it a little bit. But I'm curious about the business side of validation and considering where the market is, it's more stable, of course, but there was some time where a lot of validators, at least in my interviews, were saying that "Yeah, it's not easy. We're doing it, but it's not like it's an easy road." What about how's it been for you, and from your perspective as business, as validation as business?
This is always like a hard question because it's like my like truthful answer might like scare people away. I find like
Let's go for it.
I find validating like it's hard to get started. Like there's no doubt about it. Like it's hard. Like of course, like I'm fortunate enough to be like long in the ecosystem, and I know many people, and many people know me. So it's like when like kind of like Zucky, like with Zucky and myself, like our and Jack and stuff like this, people know us in the ecosystem. People see our commits on the repo, and so people are like a bit more trustworthy of us, and so we're able to like get that benefit. But if someone starting out who's like new to the ecosystem, it's very very hard in terms of like actually running the infrastructure. I think it's fairly easy. Like, and I think this is something that like people don't admit, or like validators don't really talk about, because it's like once you have like your infrastructure set up, it's running, like, and okay, a node goes down, like you get a notification, hey, the node's down, you open your laptop, you update it or you clean it or whatever, and you like just restart it. But it's like that happens once every 2 weeks. And then it's just like, okay, there's a new chain coming on. Like, let's join, let's set up the infrastructure. Of course, if you're white labeling, like, then there's a lot more work because you need to like do that engagement, do this extra work and everything. But if you're doing it for yourself, I don't think like the validating the infrastructure part is the difficult part. It's the more like how to build a brand around the validator to get delegations is the hard part.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Can you mention what's in your opinion? For example, let's talk about the brand of binary builders. What is the brand? What is the story behind it?
Yeah, so I mean, like, well, like, so we migrated the binary holdings validators to binary builders. And what binary holdings was me and a group of friends. It was basically two people from Cosmos and two people from Polkadot. Sean DeBreezy, Will Pankowitz, and owner Akaput. And so, like, we were running like Polkadot stuff and like their collators for their parachains, and we were running Cosmos chains, and that was just like having fun, like rarely ever sold, because it's like our cost was only our infrastructure cost. There was like we didn't like charge anything for our time or anything like that, because we're just kind of like, let's just have fun and like let's build it. I think like Will and I spent a decent amount of time on it. A lot of people know Will in the validator space, and so like he kind of like helped build that brand. And then when we're transitioning to like binary builders, it's like kind of the like business model changes a bit, because it's like, what is binary builders? Binary builders right now is like the one of the core maintainers alongside Region of the Cosmos SDK. We lead the Interchain Builders program, and so those two projects are like kind of core to the ecosystem. And so what we want to do with the validator and the proceeds from the validator is help pay for costs of operating those services. So like maybe it's like we can hire an extra engineer who's not funded by the ICF to like work on the SDK. Maybe we can hire another person at the builders program, and then we can also like add incentives to individuals on the team from the validators. So it's like we have this like model in the company that is the value goes to the value creator. And so we don't like the equity part is like kind of gets confusing, because it's like kind of if you give equity, it's like, I don't know, like no, like we're not going to raise, we're not going to like sell equity. Like no, I don't think anyone wants to buy binary equity. And so it's like the only time the people get their money back out of this equity is like if the company buys it back from them. And we think that's kind of unfair, because it's like we have this like model, and so it's like we just kind of go with the value created goes to the value creator. And so it's like if someone on the team is helping operate all the validators and like putting time into it and stuff like that, then like building the brand, then it's like the proceeds, the value created on the validator, a portion of that will go directly to that person. And so it's like kind of like incentivizing, like help build the brand and everything to be able to like build binary better. And so yeah, so it's like kind of like changing the game. It's like gonna like ideally the validator stuff is gonna help like offset like ICF costs. So we're not charging, so we're become more self-sustainable outside of like funding from the ICF for the SDK and for the builders program. So that's like how it's like changing up a bit.
You mentioned equity and it reminded me while this is why I made a note. I was actually talking to, I think it was Staking Facilities, I think so. And we were talking about a lot about validation as a business. It was like a whole episode about how to build, and we're talking about structures of and the use of equity in a validator. And by equity here, I mean it could be your own token, or it doesn't have to be Web3. It doesn't have to be outside of Web3. It depends on the validator, what they call equity. But one of the things that they mentioned, which was an interesting to me, because it goes with the philosophy, I guess, of what we are doing here,
is a reason to have that is so that the team that you hire as the validator grows understands that they own a part of the validator itself
Yeah.
and are getting also the rewards are not going to one beneficiary but actually spread amongst the holders of that equity. So what do you think about those things like that? Is it the way to go?
I think it's totally valid, and I think it's like it builds a different company. Like it builds different incentives with people. But yeah, like for us, it's just like we want okay, we give you equity, and then it's like we have to buy back the equity, and like I've had bad experiences with that from like the previous company I was at. If you can connect the dots, um, but and so it's just kind of like yeah, like at the end of the year, instead of like giving everyone equity, we're just like, hey, yeah, you like you're part of the company. Like the company generated this much money. Like we want to like give that back to the people who like created that value, which is everyone in the company. And so it's just like a direct. It's more of like a bonus payout, and it's like the company can keep operating, and because it's like if we made that much this year and everyone, it's kind of like the salesperson mentality. It's like you have your base salary, but it's like that is not the max you can make. That is like that's the min you can make. Like you can actually make way more than that and stuff like that. And so it's like now everyone's kind of like, okay, like how do we do that? Like what else can we do? Can we do auditing? Can we do validating? Can we validate on these like another like 5 chains? Can we do this? Can we do that? And so just kind of like everyone's kind of like, okay, like everyone's a bit hungrier because they know it's like there's a min, it's not a max.
It's interesting also to me because to me, I don't want to pull the quilt, but since we started the conversation, this is a very topic that I really feel connected to. To me, it's been weird. Like we've been a validator for now, like 3 years, but I've been doing it for longer. I remember doing this, but not Citizen Cosmos, of course. This was just me, like in 2016, trying out stuff like Grafana, and by Grafana I mean BitShares and stuff like that. And you had witness nodes, so I've been playing around with it for a while. But with Citizen Cosmos, to me back then, about the brand that you said, there was no branding about it. It was just me personally trying things out. With this, what I realized, and this is what I'm gonna direct back at you, um, I found it hard personally to do it, to go and start validate as many chains as possible because I didn't understand why, like, what is the reason for me to do that to earn money? Then, but I'm not here to do that. Like, I could go trading. Like, if you're 10 years on the market or 15 years in the blockchain market, well, not 15, of course, but 11, 10 years,
Yeah.
yeah, before it's happened. But like, you understand that with like, especially from people like yourself, you're deep into Cosmos SDK, and like we said, if you connect the dots properly, you understand that there's a lot more history to there. You already understand the market. For you, validating must be just so you must understand what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, like, it's the biggest dilemma we have, in my opinion, because it's like we've been here for so long, and it's like we're not here because of speculation. We're here because we like fell in love with the ideology of why blockchain was created, of why this like currency was created, and what it truly enables. And it's like I think on the last podcast we did, like I said, like the Z's of speculation that like is in like blockchain. For me, it's like having fun, but it's like the dilemma here is like I'm having fun, and this is like one of the greatest riches in life to just like enjoy what you're doing and not have it seem like a job. And like it's a dangerous thing because then you end up working nonstop because like your hobby is your job and everything. But like you have all these people around you who are opportunistic, and they're like making tons of money, and they're gonna like have this like free life. But it's like which is better? And it's like it's kind of like a never ending dilemma. But it's like for me, I don't know, like I'm having fun. Like for me, it's as long as I'm having fun, I believe like everything will go well. And so I just want to like continue on that mentality. And that's like the mentality we're trying to like breed in binary. And I think everyone is here not because, oh, it's like it pays a good salary, or um like we're here because it's like we actually like what we're doing. It's not like, oh, like I'm waking up in the morning, I have to go get on calls and stuff like this, I have to go to the office. No, it's just like everyone's like, yes, I woke up, like now I get to do this today.
think out of all the, I haven't worked in that many industries, but I've worked in several, and like in crypto, I've worked since 2016, like in the industry officially, and I think it's definitely by far the industry where you see a lot more people who are here, like-minded people, because a lot of them are here definitely for exactly what you say. They're here to understand, they understood the ideology, they want to have fun, and they don't want to have fun in the meaning of, hey, let's go get high and drunk, have fun. It's I'm having fun because I'm building this. I know that somebody's gonna might one day use that or part of it, and it's like, wow, the reward is fascinating to me.
This is definitely like what also like keeps me in Cosmos, because I think it's like we've seen many people in many different ecosystems, like they make it and they kind of get lazier. They slow down, the ecosystem slows down and stuff like this. In Cosmos, like I mean, like look at Sunny, Dave, Josh, like look at those guys. They launched Osmosis, the number one chain in Cosmos. Josh, who runs Kepler, the number one wallet in Cosmos. But they're like as hungry and as like willing to hustle as the first day I met them. And that's like what I truly love. It's like the drive hasn't left, even though like they've done all these amazing things.
I agree. I still though truly hope that we will see that as more of like the interchain. And this is actually when I want to go back to what we spoke about when I stopped you at the first 5 minutes. And I want to ask you about your vision of the interchain. What is the interchain for you? And what is your personal vision of the interchain?
We've achieved one layer of the interchain, like the original vision, and it's kind of like looking at what's next. And it's kind of like the number one complaint of users is really like this launching. And I think it's like we're going to start seeing this like roll up world emerge. And it's going to be like this, like it's going to bridge between launching a chain and deploying a contract. And so I think it's like that is a direction like the interchain will go to, where it's like we're going to have many more chains, but they're not going to be, I'm starting to use the word like many more state machines, because it's like you won't really know if it's a contract, if it's a roll up, or it's a blockchain. And so then we kind of like you create this world, sovereign communities, but it's like now the limitation of a sovereign community today is launching a chain. But now tomorrow, like the limitation, a sovereign community won't be launching a chain, it's going to be launching a roll up and stuff like this, and then launching a contract. And so it's like we're going to like get a lot more, the ecosystem's going to grow a lot more, but also we're going to have a lot more players who are building products who want to use a open and transparent ledger for a certain piece of their technology, but don't want to run all the infrastructure, come and start playing with the technology. And so that's kind of like the direction I see us going, and that's like what we're like preparing the SDK. We're refactoring a lot of the SDK to prepare for that, so people can like really play around with anything they want.
I had this crazy. Sometimes I have this thing of stupid statements that I put on Twitter. One of them was what you're saying. Kind of relate. I can relate it to that. It was when there was a DAO hack. Was it with the wrong contract or something? Was it Juno or not Juno? I don't remember who was a DAO. DAO. I don't remember. Recently, like a month ago, and I was saying, why don't just make DAOs consumer chains? Like, why don't take that way where
Yeah,
instead of protecting that, treasuries will be protected by the whole chain, kind of thing.
I think like this has more of like a roll up, because I think like a
A zone.
chain in this, yeah, it's a zone, it's all a zone. But I think like a chain in this sense is like too heavy. Like ICS V1 is too heavy. We need to make it lighter, and I think making it lighter is like going more towards the roll up world.
You mentioned in your descriptions of the interchain sovereign communities. Now, taking that into account, because I think it's important, does that mean I'm going to be, of course, I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit with the words here, of course, but go along with me if you don't mind. Like when you say that sovereign communities is part of the interchain, does that mean that things like Binance chain cannot be part of the interchain? Can they be said to have sovereign? Is their community sovereign?
Yeah, I mean, it's like their community is definitely sovereign. They're using the stack and everything, but it's like the, I mean, the interchain is like the unfortunate thing here is like it's all like, oh, like I don't want to be part of the interchain because that means I'm part of Cosmos. It's kind of like the same thing that Terra was never brand themselves as Cosmos because they didn't want to like be like part of this like brand overall branding. But it's like the interchain, like if you take away the interchain foundation, it's just like a term of chains like communicating. And I think it's like it can be anything at that point. Of course, like getting the chains to that point, like getting Binance chain to the point where it can use IBC is like a big endeavor, but like it's on the roadmap and everything. So it's like it's really like just ideally like creating these sovereign communities and bridging these communities together to exchange value and to exchange information.
It's interesting. I'll tell you a little secret. We with Citizen Cosmos been using the word interchain for the last like 4 months already as a plain term because we don't work just with the Cosmos community. We work outside
Yeah.
as well, and we've been using the term interchain as a term to describe the internet of blockchains. Like, yeah, interchain. Like people should start getting used to that interchain.
Pretty soon it's going to be like interrupt.
Instead of yes. I like that. Marco, I have like a couple of more questions, but they're kind of more like blitzy questions altogether. But before that, one last question about the Cosmos SDK. You kind of started to say that. You started to say that, yet you didn't. Do you personally have like not a dream vision, but and I'm talking from not a philosophical perspective here. I'm actually talking technological perspective here, from a perspective of a product of Cosmos SDK, the lead, sorry. What's going to be possible to do, what is not possible today, in your like wish list with Cosmos SDK in the next several years?
Oh, for sure. I mean, like a lot of the work we're doing right now is like making the SDK like fully composable, fully modular. So in the near future, like probably mid Q3, you'll be able to use the Cosmos SDK that isn't tied to Comet, and so you'll be able to use it with RollKit. If someone develops like different sequencers, you'll be able to use it like out of the box with that. All you need to do is write a wrapper, an ABCI wrapper around their implementation, and then you'll be able to use it out of the box. And so there's already that world that we're exploring. When we move one layer up from that, we go into the storage layer. This quarter, we're doing a lot of research on commitment structures, and because the like one-liner pitch is that one-liner pitch is like blockchain stopped at Merkle trees, but there's so much more. And it's basically saying that like, hey, like we have these like assumptions that were like adopted early on in blockchain, and it's been like so many years, but no one's like, and we still kind of like hold those like assumptions core to like what we think a blockchain needs and stuff like that. But there's like some of these assumptions have been invalidated, some have been validated, but those that have been invalidated, like we haven't really gone back to the drawing board and been like, okay, these are invalidated, what is the alternative? And so this is like a lot of like what we want to do on the storage layer. Some people are doing it as well. It's not only us. Once we move a layer above storage, we get into like the modules. We're like revamping all the modules, but then it's like we want to create a world where you can write a module in any language. So you'll be able to write a module in Rust. But not only that is like you'll be able to create a virtual machine and integrate into the SDK very seamlessly. Right now, like the Confio team has done an amazing job at WASM-D and the WASM VM, but like, what if there was like an easier path to get that done, to get it in? Like, there's Ethermint, there's the Polaris from the Verichain guys. Like, what if like VM communication was kind of like a first-class citizen in the SDK? And what this really brings out in the SDK is what ABCI is like ABCI is a super powerful tool that could be a lot bigger than Comet, and I think it's going to be a lot bigger than Comet. But it's like the layer between like Comet and your VM. That's a very like tough layer. Like you can like write it out, but then there's like a lot of issues. There's a lot of research that's gone into this that like it makes it very hard to develop, and that like people are doing it, but it's like taking a lot of time. And so what we would enable is like treating the Cosmos SDK like as like a middleware stack between the like this middleware stack is like the kernel, and then the modules are also part of the kernel because they can like call things natively. But then the user space is like these different languages. The user space is these virtual machines. And so that's kind of like we're on a trajectory on like where we're going with the SDK. And that's where like, yeah, we have a lot of work to do. Of course, we have a really awesome team doing it. And so everyone's like super excited. But it's also like bringing the SDK back into a new light. It's like, I think a lot of people think of the SDK as like it's like a maintenance project. Like it's not really like, oh, like it's kind of just there now and stuff like that. But it's not. Like we're doing so much more.
I definitely advise those people that think that to come and open the GitHub repositories at least and have a look at what's going on. Because I mean, I've also personally been invited. Sometimes I get invited to like some spaces or whatever, or talks or whatever, and sometimes there's people from different places, and I heard this opinion a couple of times, and every time I'm like, come on, dudes, like you can just see what's going on, not you don't need to. But it's cool. The things that you say
Yeah,
sounding exciting in terms of the interchain being actually more interchain. So I think it's
yeah, exactly.
Marco, a blitz of three questions. It doesn't have to be like, but it's like we call it a blitz. But
Mm.
give me three. It's gonna go down the questions first. Three things, and two things, and one thing. So first one is a bit boring, but it's a typical one. And give me three projects that you're technically interested in. Doesn't have to be crypto, by the way. It could be outside of crypto, but they technologically arouse you, so to speak?
I mean, I'm too deep in the rabbit hole. So
Go on.
I would say like everything going on in like ZK world is like amazing, and I think it's like ZK's usability is not only in blockchain, it's also a lot wider. So been diving into like that world a lot. Projects there like the Polymer team is doing like amazing research with their like ZK tree and ZK mint work. Super excited for that. Scroll has like some interesting stuff. They're doing like a variation of the ZK EVM. Those are like two teams. Then like let's say like take a step back from like ZK world. What is another project? I would say I dove into Arbitrum like 2 weeks ago and like really dove into their code and everything. And like some of the stuff like blew my mind. Like they compile Geth into WASM. Like of course like in that world it's like known, but I was just kind of like, wait, what the fuck? Like this is wild. And so I've just kind of been like playing around in their like tech stack and seeing what's going on.
They have some interesting projects going on now. I also actually like roughly
Yeah.
like in the last months, roughly, I started to dive more and more into Arbitrum, and I was like, "Wow, this is actually some pretty cool, fucking funky stuff."
Yeah, exactly.
Two things that motivate you in your daily life to keep on building not just the SDK, but doing how you described it, what makes you feel fun, yet motivates you to to build on bigger things, which we agree on that we do.
Like what motivates me a lot is like a lot of the Cosmos ecosystem, like seeing all these like projects using the work that we're writing and what the team's writing. And I think that's like really motivating just to see that, and like all the collaboration there is. Like SDK has like some amazing teams like collaborating with us, like Notional, Crypto.com, Osmosis, and the list kind of just goes on and on. And the other part I would say is just like the rate of innovation. I think it's just like the rate of innovation is like something we haven't seen like this in ever. Like it's like someone writes a paper and then like 6 months later it's already like there's like a new paper like making it even better.
It's crazy, absolutely fascinating. In it's not just in crypto world. There's the funny thing, like you look all around the technological world.
Yeah, I mean the I think it's like we're heading towards like a big boost in like a lot of technological, like the battery industry. Like I've been reading some papers on the battery world. It's super cool, and like there's been some like really tech breakthroughs that have gone on. The AI world is booming. It's just kind of like interesting, like playing around with it.
It's crazy.
Of course, like everyone's there. It's like part of the hype cycle right now. There's like a lot of innovation happening at the biotech level. Like it just like there kind of moves slower to like paper and into practice. So it's not like as exciting because it's like the difference we have is like someone writes a paper and like it could be in production within like 3 months.
It's fascinating. I agree. I always say that people are expecting the future to come, yet forget that we are. This is time.
Yeah,
Time doesn't work like that. We live here today. So
exactly.
last one. Person or a character, doesn't matter real or made up, dead or alive. It could be a coder, a writer, a cartoon character that not a hero, not your role model, because I'm not a role model person, but somebody or something or someone that helped you to become better, helped you to strive towards be more curious, be more explorations, like that way.
So, I mean, there's a few things, and it's like more like tidbits of people. So, like, I'd say like he's like a huge person. He also like gave me the term like if you don't feel like you're on the brink of failure, or if you're not pushing yourself to the brink of failure, you're not moving forward. And that in 2022, there's like way too many moments where it was like on the brink of failure or on the brink of like insanity. And then like I was like lucky, like I can't do this anymore. But then there's people like I don't know, like Sunny and Dave are like awesome to me. Like they're like two people that like I love working with, and they're like always so engaged and so there. And then of course, like outside of like crypto and like outside of the work life, like I think like my grandma has like influenced me the most in like how I try and like treat people, because it's like her thing has always been like her term was like why should I treat like if some like famous person walks in like why should I treat you any different than like tell me why I should treat you any different than like another person. And that's like just stuck to my head. And it's like when I see people who are like, oh, like this amazing person, I'm just like, okay, cool, like you're just a person, like you've done some cool things, but like I'm just going to treat you as a normal human being. And I think people like who have those like worlds of like, I don't know, like Vitalik. I remember like I was hanging out with him in Lisbon with Zucky, and like we were just like talking, hanging out, nothing. And then like someone from like the SDK team was like, "Oh, like, are we gonna like hang out with Vitalik? Like that's insane, blah blah blah." And I was like, "Oh, like if we do, like don't treat him like that. Like he just wants to be treated as like a normal person."
I'm glad you say that, man, and I'm glad you're using real people in your examples because it's not like that I'm trying to throw a stone at anyone I'm having conversations with, and I love all these people are all fascinating.
Yeah,
Love maybe is not the right word here, but it's interesting that a lot of people don't use real people. When you ask them that question, they go on to look a lot outside of what the world that's around us can give us. Marco, thank you very, 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 very much. I really enjoyed the conversation, really enjoyed everything you've been answering. And thank you for your time, man.
likewise. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
This content was created by the Citizen Cosmos Validator. If you enjoyed it, please support us by delegating to Citizen Cosmos and help us to create more educational content.